He heard the voice that killed his crew, and survived. When lighthouse keeper Theron saw the siren in the waves, she begged him to run. But he couldn't, because Maelys had waited 2 centuries for someone immune to her deadly song, and their impossible love was more dangerous than her curse. Subscribe now for this tale of sacrifice and drowning devotion. Storm winds howled across Widow's Peak as pale hands reached from black water toward the lighthouse. The storm came from the northeast, just like it always did. Theron watched it build from the lighthouse gallery, his weathered hands gripping the iron railing as wind tore at his coat. 5 years of standing in this exact spot had taught him to read the ocean's moods. The particular shade of gray that meant violence, the way the swells rose with deliberate hunger, the smell of electricity and salt that preceded devastation. He knew this storm. He'd died in it once already. Theron. Old Marcus's voice barely carried over the wind. The fisherman stood at the base of the lighthouse, his boat secured to the dock behind him. "Get down here! Help me with the shutters before this blows the whole village apart!" Theron didn't move. His eyes remained fixed on the horizon, where black clouds devoured the last streaks of sunset. Somewhere out there, beneath waves already cresting 15 feet high, lay the wreckage of the Meridian, and the bodies of 12 men who'd trusted him to bring them home. "Theron," Marcus called again, more urgent now. "What's wrong with you?" "Everything," Theron thought. "Everything's been wrong since that night." He descended the spiral stairs slowly, each step a familiar meditation. The lighthouse had become his prison and sanctuary both, the only place where the ghosts couldn't quite reach him. The village of Widow's Peak sprawled below, a collection of weathered houses clinging to the cliffs like barnacles. 30 families, all of them missing someone the sea had taken, all of them blaming him, even if they were too kind to say it out loud. Marcus met him at the door, his lined face etched with worry and something else. The careful distance everyone maintained around Theron these days. "Storm's going to be bad. Worse than usual." "They're all bad here," Theron said quietly. He helped Marcus drag heavy wooden shutters across the lighthouse keeper's cottage windows, the routine familiar enough that his hands worked without thought. His mind remained on the water, always on the water. "You hear about the Harper boy?" Marcus's voice carried forced casualness. "Tried to sail out yesterday morning. Perfectly clear weather. Boat came back empty, drifting in circles." Theron's jaw tightened. "How old?" 19. His mother's half mad with grief. Marcus secured the last shutter, then turned to face Theron directly. "That makes 7 this year. 7 men lost in calm waters, no storms, no logical reason. Just gone. Walked right off their boats and drowned themselves." The unspoken accusation hung between them. "And you survived when good men didn't." "I should check the lamp," Theron said, retreating toward the lighthouse entrance. "Theron." Marcus's hand caught his arm, the first time anyone had voluntarily touched him in months. "What happened that night? Really happened? Because folks are starting to say..." He cut himself off, but the damage was done. "Say what?" Theron's voice came out flat. "Dead. That I'm cursed. That death follows me. They're not wrong, Marcus. They're saying you heard it. The song." Marcus dropped his voice to barely a whisper, glancing around as if the wind itself might be listening. "The pale singer. They say that's why you survived. She marked you somehow. Let you live when she took the others." Theron pulled free from Marcus's grip. "Go home. Secure your family. This storm isn't going to wait for superstitions." He climbed back up the lighthouse stairs, leaving Marcus standing in the rain that had begun to fall. The old fisherman's words echoed in the spiral. "She marked you somehow." If only Marcus knew how right he was. The lighthouse lamp needed no tending. Theron had already prepared it hours ago, as he did every evening. But the gallery was the only place he could breathe, the only vantage point where he could see her if she came. and she always came when the storms were worst. Thunder cracked overhead as Theron resumed his position at the railing. Rain lashed his face, cold and brutal, but he didn't move. His eyes scanned the churning waters below, searching for the one thing that haunted his nightmares and his waking hours both. The song had started 5 years ago on a night exactly like this one. Theron had been captain of the Meridian, a merchant vessel carrying timber and grain from the northern ports. They'd been running late, pushing too hard to make port before the season's end. He'd ignored the weather warnings, ignored the way his most experienced sailors had exchanged uneasy glances when he'd ordered them to set course through the Widow's Peak Strait. "Captain, we should wait," his first mate had said. "These waters, at night, in a storm. We've sailed through worse," Theron had replied with the confidence of a man who'd never truly lost anything. "Keep her steady." The song had begun just after midnight. At first, he'd thought it was the wind, a peculiar howling that seemed to carry melody beneath the chaos. But then his men had started moving toward the rails, their faces slack, their eyes reflecting something Theron couldn't see. They'd walked like sleepers, like men caught in beautiful dreams, and one by one they'd climbed over the sides and dropped into the black water. Theron had screamed, had tried to grab them, had wrestled 3 men back from the edge before realizing the truth. The song was in his head too. It curled through his thoughts like silk and smoke, promising an end to every burden he'd ever carried. All he had to do was follow. All he had to do was let the water take him home. He'd made it to the rail himself, one leg over the side, before something had stopped him. Not reason, not survival instinct. Something else, a flash of clarity that cut through the song like lightning. In that moment, he'd seen her. She'd been floating 20 feet from the ship, her pale body luminous in the darkness. Long hair spread around her like seaweed, and her eyes, ancient, sorrowful eyes, had locked with his. She'd been singing, her mouth open in a call that every man but Theron had answered, and in her expression, he'd seen something that shattered the song's hold on him. She didn't want to be singing. The moment had broken. Theron had collapsed on deck, suddenly released from the compulsion. When he'd looked again, she was gone. And so were his men, all 12 of them, vanished into the storm-tossed waters without a trace. The Meridian had limped into Widow's Peak Harbor at dawn, captained by a sole survivor who couldn't explain what had happened without sounding insane. The official report listed it as a rogue wave, a tragic accident. Everyone knew Theron was lying. No one knew the truth was worse. Now, 5 years later, Theron watched the same waters and waited for her to appear again. "I know you're out there," he whispered to the storm. "I know you can hear me." Lightning illuminated the ocean in stark white flashes. Waves crashed against the cliff base 200 feet below, throwing spray high enough to miss the lighthouse gallery. The beam swept across the darkness in its endless rotation, a futile gesture of hope in waters that had swallowed so many. Then he saw her. She rose from a wave crest like something born from the water itself. Pale skin that seemed to glow with its own light, hair the color of sea foam streaming down her back. Even from this distance, even through the rain and darkness, Theron could see her face clearly, heartbreakingly beautiful and unutterably sad. Their eyes met across the storm. Theron's heart stopped. For 5 years he'd convinced himself she was a hallucination, a manifestation of guilt and trauma. But she was real. She was here. And she was looking at him with the same expression she'd worn the night his crew died. Recognition mixed with desperate warning. Her lips moved. Even though Theron couldn't possibly hear her over the storm, he knew she was singing. The song threaded into his consciousness like it had that night, a melody that promised peace, that offered oblivion, that whispered he could finally stop fighting and let go. But this time, something was different. This time, the song couldn't take him. Theron gripped the railing harder, his knuckles white, and he felt the pull of her voice the way a man might feel the pull of gravity, present, powerful, but ultimately resistible. The compulsion that had driven his men into the water couldn't quite reach the core of him. Something in his broken heart, in his 5 years of isolated grief, had made him immune. "Why?" he shouted into the wind, not knowing if she could hear him. "Why can't it take me?" The siren, because that's what she was, he finally admitted to himself, a creature from sailors, warnings, and maritime mythology, tilted her head as if his question physically hurt her. Then she did something Theron never expected. She stopped singing. Her mouth closed, and the melody cut off abruptly. The storm continued its violence, but the supernatural call that had threaded through it vanished. The siren's shoulders sagged as if an immense weight had settled on them. She raised one pale hand from the water, not beckoning, but warning, pushing him away. Then she dove beneath the waves and disappeared. Theron stood frozen at the railing, rain plastering his dark hair to his skull, his heart hammering against his ribs. For the first time in 5 years, he felt something other than numb grief. He felt alive. "Wait!" he shouted, but she was already gone. The ocean churned empty and violent, giving no sign that anything supernatural had ever disturbed its surface. Only Theron's racing pulse and the lingering echo of melody in his mind proved the encounter had been real. He remained in the gallery through the entire storm, watching, waiting, hoping she would surface again. She didn't. By dawn, the weather had broken, leaving Widow's Peak battered but standing. The lighthouse beam continued its rotation, now unnecessary in the gray morning light. Theron descended the stairs on unsteady legs, exhaustion finally claiming him. But as he reached the bottom, he found Marcus waiting at the door, his face ashen. "Another one," the old fisherman said hoarsely. "Thomas Gray, finest sailor in the village. His wife found his boat at dawn, drifting empty. He was singing when he walked into the water. She heard him from shore, singing something she'd never heard before, something beautiful and wrong." Theron's blood went cold. When? During the storm, right around midnight. Marcus's eyes were hard now, accusatory. "You were up in that gallery all night. Did you see anything? Hear anything?" "Yes," Theron wanted to say. "I saw her. I heard her. And she's real. And she's killing people. And I don't know why I'm the only one who can survive her song." Instead, he said, "Just the storm. Marcus. Just the storm." The lie tasted like salt water on his tongue. That night, Theron didn't light the lamp. He left the lighthouse dark and descended the treacherous cliff path to the beach below, a route no sane person attempted after dark, over rocks slick with spray and tide pools that could break an ankle. But Theron navigated it with the sure-footedness of a man who no longer feared death. The beach was a narrow strip of black sand and jagged rocks, constantly battered by waves. During high tide, it disappeared entirely. During low tide, it revealed caves that tunneled deep into the cliff face, places where smugglers once hid contraband, where local children were forbidden to play. Theron stood at the water's edge and called out to the darkness, "I know you're here. Show yourself." Only waves answered, crashing and retreating in their eternal rhythm. "Please," he said, "quieter now. I need to understand. Why did you take my men? Why can't you take me?" The ocean surged, and she rose from it like a ghost. She was even more beautiful up close, and more terrible. Her skin held a translucent quality, as if she were made of water that had learned to hold a shape. Her eyes were the color of deep ocean, dark blue verging on black, and they held centuries of sorrow. The lower half of her body remained submerged, but Theron could see the powerful tail that moved beneath the surface, keeping her upright in the churning shallows. When she spoke, her voice was like the whisper of waves on sand, soft, musical, devastating. "You need to leave this place," she said, "before the next full moon, before I kill you too." Theron took a step closer, seawater soaking his boots. Why haven't you already? That night on the Meridian, you could have taken me. Tonight in the storm, your song couldn't touch me. Why? I don't know, she whispered, and the honesty in her voice broke something in Theron's chest. You're the first. In 200 years, you're the first who heard me and survived. That should be impossible. What are you? Cursed, she said simply. Bound to these waters, forced to sing, whether I will it or not. And everyone who hears me dies walking into my arms. Her expression twisted with anguish. I've tried to stop. I've tried to stay silent. But when the moon is full, the song comes from my throat like breathing. I can't control it. I can't stop it. All I can do is watch them drown. Theron's mind reeled. This wasn't a monster. This was a prisoner. The Harper boy, he said. Thomas Gray, my crew, you killed them all. Yes. No excuses, no justification, just the terrible truth. Ian, you'll kill again. Yes. Her voice broke on the word. That's why you have to leave. Because eventually, I'll figure out why you can resist me. And when I do, when I finally understand what makes you different, the song will adapt. It always does. And then you'll walk into the water like all the others, and I'll have to watch you die knowing I could have saved you by driving you away now. She began to sink back into the waves, but Theron lunged forward, seawater rising to his knees. Wait. What's your name? She paused, half submerged, and something shifted in her ancient eyes. Surprise, perhaps, that anyone would bother to ask. Maelys, she said softly. My name was Maelys, before the curse, before I became this. Theron, he replied, and I'm not leaving, Maelys. Not until I understand what happened to my men. Not until I know if there's a way to free you. There isn't, she said, with the finality of someone who'd spent centuries searching. I've looked for every solution, consulted every source of magic that still exists in this world. The curse is absolute. The only way to free me is to kill me, and I can't die. I've tried. The admission hung in the air between them, more horrifying than any monster could be. I'll find a way, Theron said, not knowing where the certainty came from. I'll find a way to break it. Maelys stared at him for a long moment, her expression cycling through emotions too complex to name. Then she smiled, sad and small and heartbreakingly human. You're a fool, Theron the survivor. You should have drowned with your crew. It would have been kinder. She vanished beneath the waves, leaving Theron alone on the beach as the tide rolled in. But he could still hear her voice in his mind, even without the compulsion. You're a fool. Perhaps he was. But for the first time since the Meridian went down, Theron had a purpose beyond simple survival. He would save her, or die trying. Either way, the ghosts would finally stop haunting him. Theron became a man possessed. The village noticed the change immediately. Where before he'd been a ghost haunting the lighthouse, now he moved with purpose. Every free moment found him in the maritime archives housed in the village church. Dusty logs and yellowed manuscripts documenting 300 years of shipwrecks along the Widow's Peak coast. Father Dominic, the elderly priest who maintained the records, watched with growing concern as Theron spread charts and journals across the wooden tables. And what are you looking for, son? Patterns, Theron replied without looking up. His finger traced a route along a faded map, marking locations where ships had gone down under mysterious circumstances. These wrecks, 1823, 1845, 1867, 1891, 1903, all of them happened during full moons. All of them reported hearing singing before the crews vanished. Father Dominic's face went pale. You shouldn't dig into such things. Some knowledge brings only darkness. I need to understand. Theron pulled another journal toward him, this one bound in cracked leather and dated 1756. There's a pattern here. A cycle. She's been in these waters for at least 2 centuries, killing without wanting to. Someone must have documented the truth. The priest's voice dropped to barely a whisper. Theron finally looked up, meeting the old man's frightened eyes. The pale singer. She's real, Father. And she's not a monster. She's cursed. Father Dominic made the sign of the cross. Leave it alone, Theron. Whatever you think you've found, it will only bring more death. The sea keeps its secrets for good reason. But Theron couldn't stop. He spent 3 days and nights buried in the archives, surviving on coffee and the few hours of sleep he stole between tending the lighthouse. The full moon was 12 days away. 12 days until Maelys would sing again. Until another sailor would walk into the water. Until another family would join the grieving masses of Widow's Peak. On the 4th morning, he found it. A leather-bound volume hidden behind rotting shipping manifests, its pages brittle with age. The handwriting was elegant but hurried, dated 1803, written by a merchant captain named Elias Crane. I have seen her with my own eyes, the creature the locals whisper about. I was the sole survivor when the Phantom's Bride went down last autumn. 23 good men answered her call and drowned themselves singing, but I remained aboard, my hands gripping the wheel so tight they bled, and I watched her as she watched them die. She wept. A monster does not weep for its victims. This is no demon of the deep, no malicious spirit hungry for souls. This is a woman, or was one once, trapped in a nightmare she cannot escape. Her song pulls men to their deaths, as surely as the tide, but the horror in her eyes speaks of captivity, not cruelty. I have spent the month since researching in every port, consulting with every scholar of maritime lore I could find. The legends speak of her kind, sirens, they call them, though that word encompasses many creatures. This particular curse is ancient and specific, the binding of tides. She is anchored to these waters by magic older than memory. Every full moon, the song rises from her throat whether she wills it or not, and every man who hears it dies. The curse feeds on death to sustain itself. She cannot leave. She cannot die. She cannot stop singing. But the texts I've found mention one impossible thing. A man who could resist her song might also be the key to breaking it. How or why, the sources do not say. Only that immunity suggests a heart already so broken that her call cannot reach its core. I pray some future soul finds this account. I pray they have the courage I lack to seek her out, to learn her true name, to attempt what I cannot. For if she remains bound, she will sing for eternity, and these waters will never know peace. Theron's hands shook as he closed the journal. A heart already so broken that her call cannot reach its core. He thought of the 5 years he'd spent drowning in grief, the way he'd welcomed death every single day since the meridian went down. No wonder the song couldn't take him. There was nothing left in him to seduce. He was already as close to dead as a living man could be. But Elias Crane's words offered something more precious than explanation: hope. A man who could resist her song might also be the key to breaking it. Theron copied the relevant passages into his own journal, then returned the ancient volume to its hiding place. As he left the church, Father Dominic caught his arm. Whatever you're planning, don't. That creature has claimed too many lives already. Don't let yours be next. She's not a creature, Theron said quietly. She's a prisoner, and I'm going to free her. The old priest's expression shifted from fear to pity. Then God help you both. That night, Theron returned to the beach. He'd spent the afternoon gathering supplies: a waterproof lantern, rope, his grandfather's silver compass, and a leather satchel containing bread, dried fish, and a flask of whiskey. He didn't know if Maelys would appear, but he'd wait as long as necessary. The ocean was calmer than usual, its surface reflecting scattered starlight. Theron settled onto a flat rock above the tide line and set the lantern beside him. Then he waited. She came at midnight. Maelys rose from the shallows more hesitantly than before, as if expecting him to flee or attack. When he simply remained seated, watching her with steady eyes, confusion flickered across her face. "You're still here," she said. Not quite a question. "And I told you I wasn't leaving." Theron held up the flask. "I brought whiskey. I don't know if you can drink it, but the offer stands." A surprised laugh escaped her, musical and genuine, so at odds with her sorrowful reputation that it made Theron's chest ache. "I haven't tasted whiskey in 237 years. How long exactly have you been cursed?" The laughter died. Maelys drifted closer, her tail moving in slow, hypnotic sweeps beneath the water. In the lantern light, Theron could see details he'd missed before: the faint scales that patterned her arms like lace, the webbing between her fingers, the gills that opened and closed subtly along her ribs. "It was August of 1789, she said softly. "I was 23 years old, human mortal. My father was a ship's captain, my mother a seamstress. We lived in a village much like this one, 300 miles up the coast. What happened?" Maelys was quiet for so long that Theron thought she wouldn't answer. When she finally spoke, her voice carried the weight of centuries. "I fell in love with the wrong man, a merchant lord named Carrick who visited our port twice yearly. He was beautiful, charming, wealthy. Everything a fisherman's daughter could never hope to claim. But he courted me anyway. Swore he would marry me. Promised me the world." She smiled bitterly. "I was young and foolish enough to believe him. I gave him everything, my heart, my innocence, my trust. And when I told him I was carrying his child, he laughed. Said I was a pleasant distraction, nothing more. He had a proper wife waiting in the capital, children of legitimate birth. What was I but a portside amusement?" Theron's jaw tightened with anger on behalf of a girl who'd been dead for over 2 centuries. "I was heartbroken," Maelys continued. "Destroyed. I walked to these cliffs in the middle of the night, fully intending to throw myself into the water and end the shame, the pain, the future I saw stretching ahead as an unwed mother in a village that would shun me. But you didn't jump." "No." Something stopped me at the edge. A voice, whispering from the waves. It promised me vengeance. It promised me power. It promised that Carrick would never hurt another woman the way he'd hurt me. Her eyes locked with Theron's, ancient and haunted. It offered me a choice: die as a victim, or live as a force that would make men pay for their cruelty. And you accepted. I was 23, pregnant and suicidal. I would have agreed to anything. Maelys's voice broke. I didn't understand what the choice meant. I didn't know I was making a deal with something ancient and immoral, something that saw humans as toys to be played with. The magic took me that night, dragged me into the water, transformed my body, bound me to these shores forever. Your child, gone. The transformation killed it. She touched her abdomen, the gesture unconscious and heartbreaking. I became this, neither human nor fish, neither living nor dead, a creature designed for one purpose: to sing men to their deaths as payment for my foolish desire for revenge. Did it work? Did Carrick die? Oh yes. Maelys's smile was terrible. In 3 weeks after my transformation, his ship passed through these waters. I sang, and he heard me, and he walked into the ocean calling my name. I held him as he drowned, watched the recognition in his eyes as he realized what I'd become, and I felt. She paused, her voice dropping to barely a whisper. Nothing, no satisfaction, no justice, just horror at what I'd done, at what I'd become. But you couldn't stop. No. The curse doesn't care about remorse. Every full moon, the song rises from my throat like a scream I can't control. And every man who hears it dies. Sailors, fishermen, merchants. boys barely old enough to crew a boat. The curse makes no distinctions. It simply feeds. Theron processed this, understanding crystallizing in his mind. That's why you tried to warn me away. Why you looked so devastated that night on the Meridian. You shouldn't have survived, Maelys said desperately. No one survives. But you did. And I don't understand why. And that terrifies me because it means... She cut herself off, shaking her head. It means what? It means I've started hoping again, and hope is the cruelest thing you can give someone in my situation. Theron stood, moving to the water's edge. Maelys tensed as if to flee, but he simply held out the flask. Tell me about the curse's rules. Everything. If I'm going to find a way to break it, I need to understand exactly how it works. There is no way to break it, Theron. I've searched. For 200 years, alone, with no one to help you. He stepped into the shallows, cold water soaking his pants. You've never had someone on the outside researching, someone who can access archives and scholars and sources you can't reach. Let me help you. Why? The question emerged raw and bewildered. Why would you risk everything for a creature that killed your crew? Because you're not a creature. You're a woman who made a desperate choice and has been paying for it for 2 centuries. Theron extended the flask again. And because I've spent 5 years wishing I'd drowned that night too. Maybe saving you is how I finally save myself. Maelys stared at him with an expression of such naked longing that it hurt to witness. Slowly, carefully, she reached out and took the flask. Her fingers brushed his, cold as deep ocean, smooth as water-worn stone. The touch sent electricity through Theron's nerves. She raised the flask to her lips and drank, then coughed, her eyes watering. It's horrible. I'd forgotten how horrible whiskey is. Want another sip? Yes. They shared the flask as Maelys explained the curse's mechanics. The song was triggered by the full moon and couldn't be suppressed. Its range extended roughly a mile in all directions, far enough to reach any ship passing through the strait. Men who heard it experienced overwhelming compulsion to reach the singer, walking into the water regardless of danger. They died in her arms, drowning while singing her song back to her, their deaths feeding magic that sustained both the curse and Maelys herself. I don't need to eat or sleep, she said. The curse sustains me through their deaths. I'm a parasite feeding on tragedy. You're a victim feeding on other victims, Theron corrected. The curse is the parasite. The distinction doesn't comfort the men I've drowned. What about me? Theron asked. Yeah, why am I different? Maelys studied him intently, her dark eyes seeming to look through him rather than at him. Your heart is broken in a way I've never encountered before. Most men carry pain. Yes, but they also carry hope, desire, dreams of the future. The song speaks to those things, promises to fulfill them. But you... She reached out, her cold fingers hovering just above his chest. You have no dreams left, no desires. You're already drowning in grief. There's nothing for my song to hook into. Is that why you wept? When you saw me that night? I wept because you survived, and survival means you'll have to live with what you witnessed. Because you'll never forget my face or my voice, and that memory will haunt you forever. Her hand dropped back to the water. I wept because I damned you to a different kind of death, the slow death of living with ghosts. Theron caught her retreating hand, holding it gently. Her skin was impossibly cold, but he didn't let go. Maybe we can haunt each other. Maybe 2 ghosts together are less lonely than 1 ghost alone. Maelys's breath hitched, an unnecessary gesture for a creature who no longer needed air, but human enough to break his heart. You don't know what you're offering. Then show me. Tell me everything. Let me understand what you're facing, and we'll find a way through it together. For the first time in 237 years, Maelys allowed herself to believe that maybe, impossibly, dangerously, someone understood. She began to talk, and Theron listened until dawn painted the sky gray and gold. She told him about the underwater caves where she hid during the daylight hours, the strange half-life of a creature caught between worlds. She described the loneliness of centuries, the way she'd watched the world change from beneath the waves while remaining forever frozen at 23 years old. She told him about the other men who'd survived initially, Elias Crane among them, and how they'd all eventually succumbed weeks or months later, as if the song had planted a seed that bloomed into death when they least expected it. "That's why you have to leave," she said again. "The curse might not have taken you yet, but it will find a way. It always does." "No," Theron said simply. "I'm staying, and in 7 days when the full moon rises, I'm going to be here with you, and we're going to find a way to break this. You're insane." "Probably," he smiled, a real smile, the first in 5 years. "But I'm also the only man alive who can hear you sing and live to tell about it. That has to mean something." Maelys opened her mouth to argue, then closed it, because he was right, and they both knew it. Whatever cosmic force had brought them together, it wasn't coincidence. 7 days, she whispered. "Then the moon will be full, and the song will come, and we'll see if your immunity holds. I'll be ready." As the sun broke fully over the horizon, Maelys dove beneath the waves, but before she disappeared, she surfaced one last time, her expression vulnerable in the dawn light. "Thank you, Theron, for seeing me, for trying, even if it fails. Thank you." Then she was gone, leaving Theron alone on the beach with the taste of salt on his lips and the memory of her cold hand in his. 7 days until the full moon. 7 days to prepare for a test that would either save them both or kill him. Theron walked back to the lighthouse with purpose burning in his chest. He had research to do, preparations to make, and a curse to break. The ghosts could wait. He had someone living to save. The next 7 days passed in a fever dream of preparation and discovery. Theron divided his time between the lighthouse, the maritime archives, and the beach where Maelys surfaced each night. Their meetings became ritual. He would arrive at midnight with his lantern and whatever research he'd uncovered that day, and she would emerge from the waves to share what she knew of magic, curses, and the ancient forces that bound her. On the third night, she took him to her sanctuary. "Can you hold your breath?" Maelys asked, floating in the shallows. "Long enough. Why?" "Because I want to show you where I live, where I hide when the sun rises, and the shame of what I am becomes too heavy to bear." Her eyes held a vulnerability he hadn't seen before. No one has ever seen it. No human, at least. Theron didn't hesitate. He stripped off his coat and boots, then waded deeper until the water reached his chest. The cold stole his breath, but he ignored it. Led the way. Maelys' expression softened. She dove, and Theron followed. The underwater world opened before him like a dream painted in darkness. Maelys moved through the water with liquid grace, her tail propelling her effortlessly while Theron kicked and pulled himself along behind her. Just when his lungs began to burn, she led him into a cave entrance hidden behind kelp curtains. They surfaced in an air pocket, a cavern carved by centuries of tide, its ceiling lost in shadow. Phosphorescent algae coated the walls, casting everything in ethereal blue-green light. The water here was calmer, warmer, protected from the ocean's violence. "This is home," Maelys said quietly. "Such as it is." Theron treaded water, taking in the space. A flat rock shelf at the cavern's edge served as a resting place. Shells and smooth stones were arranged in careful patterns, art created from loneliness and time. A rusted compass sat beside a collection of waterlogged books, their pages long since melded together. "It's beautiful," he said truthfully. "It's a tomb." But her voice held gratitude that he didn't pity her. She pulled herself onto the rock shelf, her tail transforming as she left the water. Scales receded, fins dissolved, and human legs emerged, pale and perfect, as if the transformation happened daily despite 2 centuries of practice. Theron climbed up beside her, his clothes plastered to his body. They sat in comfortable silence, listening to water lap against stone. "Tell me about your life before," Maelys said. "Before the Meridian. Before you became the Keeper of Ghosts." So Theron talked. He told her about growing up on ships, about earning his captain's rank at 28, about the pride and joy of commanding a crew. He spoke of his younger sister who'd died of fever at 16, of parents long gone to age and ocean. He described the weight of responsibility he'd carried and how spectacularly he'd failed when it mattered most. "I was arrogant," he admitted. "I thought I could outsail any storm, outthink any danger. My confidence killed 12 good men. I deserve every nightmare, every accusation, every moment of grief." "No one deserves that," Maelys said softly. She reached out, hesitating, then placed her hand over his. Her skin was still cold but warming slowly in the air. "We both made choices in moments of pain. We both carry consequences that seem too heavy to bear. But neither of us deserves to be destroyed by our mistakes forever." Theron turned his hand over, lacing his fingers through hers. The gesture felt monumental, the first intentional touch between them, chosen rather than accidental. "Your heart is broken," Maelys whispered, echoing her earlier observation. "But it's not dead. I can feel it beating." "So can I," Theron said. "For the first time in 5 years, I can feel it." The moment stretched between them, charged with something neither had expected to feel again: connection, understanding, the dangerous stirring of hope. Maelys pulled back first, though her eyes held regret. "We shouldn't. This is dangerous. Everything about this is dangerous. I mean," she struggled for words, "if I start to care, if this becomes more than strategy and research. The curse feeds on death, Theron, but it also feeds on emotion. Strong feelings make the song stronger. If I..." She couldn't finish. "If you fall in love with me, the song will become more powerful," Theron completed. "I know. I found references in the archives. Elias Crane mentioned it. Then you understand why we have to maintain distance. Clinical distance, research partners, nothing more. Is that what you want?" Maelys looked away, her jaw tight. "What I want stopped mattering the night I made my deal. All that matters now is keeping you alive long enough to find a solution, if one exists. And if I'm willing to risk it. Risk the stronger song, risk everything, for the chance that maybe we can break this curse together." "Then you're a fool." But her voice broke on the word. Theron shifted closer, drawing her attention back to him. "I've been called worse, usually by myself, in the darkness, when the ghosts won't let me sleep. But here, now, with you, I don't feel like a fool. I feel like a man who finally found something worth fighting for. I've killed so many, against your will, after being manipulated and cursed by something evil that preyed on your pain." He cupped her face gently, feeling her lean infinitesimally into his touch. "You are not your curse, Maelys. You are the woman who weeps for her victims, who begs strangers to run from her, who has endured 200 years of isolation rather than simply embrace what she's become. That's who you are." A single tear tracked down her cheek, salt water indistinguishable from the ocean that created her. "I haven't cried in decades. I thought I'd forgotten how." "Then cry," Theron said gently. "Cry for everything you've lost, everything you've endured. I'll be here. I'm not going anywhere." And Maelys did cry. Deep, wrenching sobs that shook her entire body. Theron held her through it, his arms around her cold shoulders, his presence solid and unwavering. She cried for Carrick and the girl she'd been. She cried for her lost child and stolen future. She cried for every man she'd drowned and every lonely night in this cavern. She cried until the phosphorescent light seemed to dim with the weight of her grief. When the tears finally subsided, she pulled back, embarrassed. "I'm sorry. I didn't mean to. Don't apologize. Not for being human. I'm not human anymore." "You're more human than most people I've met," Theron smiled. "More human than I've been in 5 years." Maelys studied him with something like wonder. Then, moving slowly enough that he could have stopped her, she leaned forward and pressed her lips to his. The kiss was soft, tentative, tasting of salt and tears and 2 centuries of loneliness. Theron responded gently, his hand moving to cradle the back of her head. Her hair was like silk between his fingers, cool and slightly damp. When they separated, Maelys's eyes were wide. "That was dangerous," Theron offered. "Perfect," she corrected. "And yes, dangerous, impossibly dangerous. The curse will feel this, Theron. It will know I'm beginning to care, and it will respond. Let it respond. We'll face it together." "You don't understand what you're asking. Then help me understand. Show me everything. The curse, the magic, the rules that bind you. We have 4 days until the full moon. 4 days to prepare. If caring about each other makes the song stronger, then we'll find a way to make my immunity stronger too." Maelys wanted to argue. He could see it in her expression, in the way her mouth opened to protest. But instead, she kissed him again. Deeper this time, more certain, as if sealing a pact neither could take back. 4 days, she whispered against his lips. Then we'll know if love is strong enough to break a curse, or if it only makes the breaking worse. They spent the remaining hours before dawn, planning, researching, and occasionally stealing moments of touch that felt simultaneously natural and impossible. As the sky began to lighten, Maelys led Theron back through the underwater passage to the beach. "Tonight," she said, already sinking into deeper water. "Come earlier. I'll teach you about the magic, show you what I know of the binding. If there's weakness anywhere, we'll find it together." "Tonight," Theron agreed. He watched her dive and disappear, then trudged back to the lighthouse with his heart pounding and his mind racing. 4 days until the full moon. 4 days until everything would change, one way or another. The ghosts that usually haunted him were strangely quiet. Perhaps they sensed what Theron was only beginning to understand. He was finally ready to live again. And if living meant facing an ancient curse beside a woman who'd been dead for 200 years, so be it. Some things were worth drowning for. The traveling scholar arrived on a gray afternoon 3 days before the full moon. Theron was descending from the lighthouse when he noticed the stranger, a thin man in his 50s wearing weathered traveling clothes and carrying a leather satchel that looked older than he was. The man stood at the village edge, consulting a hand-drawn map and frowning at the lighthouse. "Can I help you?" Theron called out. The stranger looked up, his eyes sharp and calculating behind wire-rimmed spectacles. "Are you the lighthouse keeper? Theron, they call you?" "I am." "Excellent. My name is Dr. Aldous Finch. I'm a maritime mythologist from the university. I've been tracking patterns of supernatural shipwrecks along this coast." He extended a hand. "I believe you might have information relevant to my research." Theron's blood ran cold. He shook the offered hand cautiously. "What kind of information?" "May we speak privately? This concerns matters most. Villagers would rather not discuss." They walked to the lighthouse keeper's cottage. Theron made tea while Dr. Finch unpacked books and journals from his satchel, spreading them across the small table. Ancient texts, maritime logs, maps marked with symbols Theron didn't recognize. "I'll be direct," Finch said, accepting the teacup. You survived an encounter with the Pale Singer 5 years ago. You're the only documented survivor in the past century. I need to know how." Theron's hand tightened around his own cup. "What do you know about her?" "More than most. Less than I'd like." Finch opened one of the books, a leather-bound volume with pages covered in cramped handwriting. "I've spent 20 years studying siren curses. The entity haunting these waters is particularly tragic. A binding curse, self-sustaining through death, impossible to break through conventional means." "What about unconventional means?" Finch's eyebrows rose. "You've been researching. Good. Then you know the curse is anchored through tidal magic. Old, primal forces that predate human civilization. Breaking it requires either destroying the siren or finding a willing substitute to take her place." The words hit Theron like a physical blow. "A substitute?" "Someone who volunteers to bear the curse in her stead. Full transference. The original victim goes free, assuming they haven't been bound too long. After a certain point, the curse and the host become inseparable." Finch sipped his tea, oblivious to Theron's growing horror. Of course, finding someone willing to condemn themselves to eternal singing and involuntary murder is virtually impossible, which is why these curses persist for centuries. Theron's mind raced. Take her place. Bind himself to the ocean floor, become the thing that calls men to their deaths, trade his life for hers. Is there no other way? 1. Finch flipped through pages until he found a specific passage. But it's worse. If a siren truly falls in love, genuine, reciprocated, soul-deep love, and that love is returned with equal intensity, the curse undergoes a transformation. Instead of binding one person, it spreads. Spreads how? The song amplifies exponentially. Instead of affecting men within a mile, it reaches 50 miles or more. Instead of killing during full moons, it kills constantly. The siren becomes a weapon of mass destruction, and everyone they love becomes collateral damage. Finch met Theron's eyes seriously. Love doesn't break these curses. It weaponizes them. Theron felt sick. Everything he and Maelys had been building, the connection, the hope, the stolen kisses, was making things worse. Every moment of caring was another nail in the coffin for anyone unfortunate enough to live on this coast. "There must be something else," he said desperately. "Some loophole, some ancient ritual. If there were, don't you think she would have found it in 2 centuries? Finch's tone was gentle, but firm. "These curses are designed to be unbreakable. The entity that created it wanted eternal punishment, not eventual redemption. Your immunity is fascinating from a research perspective, but it doesn't change the fundamental nature of her binding. What if..." Theron struggled to find words. What if she went far away, left these waters entirely? She can't. The curse anchors her to the specific location where it was cast. She likely can't move more than a few miles from shore, without experiencing excruciating pain or death. Finch closed his books. "I'm sorry. I know you were hoping for better news. But the kindest thing you can do is maintain distance. Don't let affection develop. Don't give the curse fuel to grow stronger." After Finch left, Theron sat alone in the cottage for hours, staring at nothing. The choice before him was impossible. Stay away from Maelys and condemn her to eternal loneliness and killing. Get closer and risk amplifying the curse until it destroyed the entire coast. Or volunteer to take her place, trading one prison for another. That night, he went to the beach earlier than usual. Maelys sensed his mood immediately when she surfaced. "What happened? Tell me the truth," Theron said without preamble. "You knew, didn't you, that falling in love would make the curse worse?" Her face went pale. "Who told you?" "A scholar, Dr. Finch. He's studied siren curses for 20 years. Theron's voice was raw. "He confirmed what you suspected. Love doesn't break the binding, it amplifies it. Were you planning to tell me? I was trying to protect you. By lying. By letting me develop feelings that could kill hundreds of people. He ran his hands through his hair, frustration and fear warring in his chest. Oh, what were you thinking, Maelys? I was thinking that for the first time in 200 years, I felt human again. Her voice cracked. I was thinking that maybe, impossibly, you were different enough that the rules wouldn't apply. I was thinking I'd rather have 4 days of feeling alive than another century of existing as a monster. The anguish in her voice deflated his anger. Theron closed his eyes, breathing slowly. Finch said there are only 2 options. I take your place through transference, or we stay apart forever. No. Maelys's response was immediate and fierce. You are not taking my place. I won't allow it. It's not your choice. The hell it isn't. She propelled herself closer to shore, her eyes blazing. I've spent 200 years drowning men. I won't add you to that list, Theron. I won't let you sacrifice yourself for me. And I won't let you suffer alone for eternity. He waded into the water until they were face to face. If there's a way to free you, even if it costs me everything, then you die or worse, and I have to live knowing I destroyed the only person who ever saw me as human. How is that freedom? Tears streamed down her face. How is that anything but a different kind of curse? They stood in the shallows, the water swirling around them, both realizing the impossible position they were in. There has to be another way, Theron whispered. There isn't. There never was. Maelys touched his face gently. This is why I tried to warn you away. This is why I said hope was cruel. Because now we both have to live with knowing we could have had something beautiful, but the cost is too high. I don't accept that. You have to. No. Theron caught her hand, holding it against his chest. I have 2 days before the full moon. 2 days to find something Finch missed, something you haven't discovered, some possibility we haven't considered. I'm not giving up. Theron, promise me you won't give up either. Promise me that if I find something, anything, you'll at least consider it. Maelys searched his face, clearly torn between hope and resignation. Finally, she nodded. I promise. But when you find nothing, we have to accept reality. When I find something, Theron corrected, we'll face it together. He kissed her then, desperate and fierce, tasting salt and sorrow. She kissed him back with equal intensity, as if trying to memorize the moment before it was taken away. When they separated, both were shaking. 2 days, Maelys whispered. But 2 days, Theron agreed. He returned to the lighthouse with determination burning in his chest. Somewhere in the archives, in ancient texts, in forgotten lore, there had to be an answer Finch hadn't found. Because the alternative, losing Maelys to eternal suffering or losing himself to willing sacrifice, was unacceptable. Love might not break curses, but Theron refused to believe it couldn't bend them. He had 2 days to prove everyone wrong. Theron didn't sleep for the next 48 hours. He tore through every archive, every dusty volume, every scrap of maritime folklore he could find. Father Dominic tried to intervene, but Theron barely heard him. His mind worked frantically, searching for the loophole that had to exist. By the morning of the full moon, he'd found nothing. Dr. Finch had been thorough. Every possible solution led to the same conclusions: transference, amplification, or eternal imprisonment. The curse was designed to be perfect in its cruelty. Theron stood in the lighthouse gallery as the sun climbed higher, exhaustion making his vision blur. Below, the village prepared for another deadly night. Boats were secured far inland. Families locked themselves in cellars. Everyone knew what the full moon meant. I failed you, Theron whispered to the empty air, thinking of Maelys hiding in her underwater cavern. "I'm sorry." Then he saw the fishing boats. 3 vessels on the horizon, sails full, heading directly toward the strait. Theron's heart stopped. He grabbed his telescope, focusing on the lead ship. The banner showed a merchant's crest. They were traders from the southern ports, unaware of the danger. They would arrive at sunset, right when the moon rose, right when Maelys would begin to sing. Theron ran down the stairs, his legs nearly giving out. He reached the harbor where Marcus was securing his boat. "Those ships," Theron pointed frantically. "We have to warn them. Turn them back." Marcus followed his gaze and paled. "God help us. They'll never hear our signals in time." "Fire the warning cannon." "Already tried. Wind's wrong. Sound won't carry." Marcus gripped Theron's shoulder. "There's nothing we can do except pray they pass before moonrise." But Theron knew they wouldn't. He'd studied currents and winds for years. Those ships would arrive exactly when the curse activated. 15 men at minimum, all about to walk, singing into the water. Unless he could stop it. An idea formed, desperate, possibly suicidal, but the only option left. Theron ran back to the lighthouse, gathered rope and his grandfather's compass, then headed for the beach. He had hours until sunset, hours to prepare. Maelys surfaced as afternoon shadows lengthened, her expression anguished. "You found nothing." "No." Theron waded into the water. "But I found something else. 3 merchant vessels approaching. They'll be here when you sing." Horror flooded her face. "No, no. I'll chain myself deeper. I'll swim to the farthest reaches. It won't matter. The song will reach them." Theron took her cold hands. "But I have an idea. It's insane and it might kill me, but it's the only chance." "What are you planning?" "I'm going to be here when you sing, close enough that the song focuses on me instead of spreading wide. If my immunity holds, if I can absorb the curse's attention, maybe the others will pass safely." Maelys stared at him in disbelief. "That's not how it works. The song doesn't choose targets. It spreads indiscriminately. But it responds to emotion, to connection. You said love amplifies it. What if we use that? What if you sing directly to me, focus everything on me, and the curse concentrates instead of dispersing? You're asking me to deliberately try to kill you. I'm asking you to trust that I'm strong enough to survive." Theron cupped her face. "You've spent 2 centuries trying to warn men away. For once, let someone stand beside you and fight. This is madness. Everything about us is madness." He kissed her forehead. "But it's our madness, our choice. And I'd rather die trying to save those men than live knowing I did nothing." Tears streamed down Maelys' face. "I can't lose you. Not after everything." "You won't. I survived once. I'll survive again." He pulled her close, feeling her cold body against his chest. "Trust me. Trust us." The sun sank lower. The merchant ships drew closer. The moon began its inevitable rise. Maelys held Theron tighter, memorizing the feeling of his warmth, his solidity, his impossible courage. "If this works, if you survive, then we keep fighting. We find another way. We don't give up." He tilted her chin up. "And if I don't survive, at least those men live. At least you'll know someone chose to face the curse beside you instead of running from it. That's not comfort. It's all I have to offer." The moon crested the horizon, huge and silver, its light painting the water in shimmering paths. Theron felt the change immediately. Maelys stiffened in his arms, her body going rigid. Her eyes widened with panic. "It's starting," she gasped. "Theron, please, run. No." He held her tighter. "I'm staying. Sing to me, Maelys, only to me. Focus everything on me." The song began. It rose from Maelys' throat like a physical force, beautiful and terrible, a melody that promised everything and delivered only death. Theron felt it slam into him, trying to burrow into his mind, his heart, his very soul. The compulsion was stronger than before, amplified by their connection, by the feelings they'd allowed to grow. "Come to me," the song whispered. "Let go. Find peace in the depths." Theron's vision blurred. His legs moved involuntarily toward deeper water. Every instinct screamed at him to surrender, to walk into Maelys's arms and let the ocean claim him. His crew's faces flashed through his mind, welcoming him, telling him it was finally time to join them. But beneath the compulsion, he felt something else. Maelys's anguish, her desperate attempt to control the uncontrollable, to focus the curse on him instead of letting it spread. She was fighting the magic with everything she had, trying to protect the merchant ships even as it destroyed her to sing. Theron grabbed onto that feeling, her pain, her determination, her sacrifice. He anchored himself to it. "I'm still here," he gritted out, though his body was waist-deep in the water now. "Keep going. I can take it." Maelys sang harder, the melody intensifying until it felt like knives in Theron's skull. Blood trickled from his nose. His hands clawed at the water, half fighting, half surrendering. The line between resistance and capitulation blurred. On the horizon, the merchant ships sailed past the strait, oblivious to the supernatural battle happening in the shallows. "Almost," Theron gasped. "They're almost through." The song crested. Maelys screamed through the melody, tears and seawater streaming down her face as she poured everything into the curse. Theron dropped to his knees, water closing over his head. His lungs burned. His vision went dark, but he felt Maelys's hands on him, pulling him up, breaking her own song to save him. The melody cut off abruptly. The merchant ships disappeared around the point, safe and unaware. The moon continued its climb, indifferent to the drama below. Theron surfaced, coughing and shaking, supported by Maelys's arms. "Did it work?" "They passed," she sobbed. "You insane, beautiful fool. They passed." She held him as he trembled with exhaustion and shock. "But you almost died. You were seconds from drowning." "But I didn't." Theron managed a weak smile. "We did it. Together." "Never again," Maelys said fiercely. I won't. We proved something tonight." Theron's voice was hoarse but certain. "The curse responds to will, to choice, to love. It can be directed, controlled, even if we can't break it yet." Maelys looked at him with wonder and terror. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying maybe the answer isn't breaking the curse. Maybe it's learning to live with it together. Finding ways to minimize harm. Fighting it every full moon until we're strong enough to..." He never finished the sentence. Exhaustion claimed him, and he collapsed in her arms. Maelys carried him to shore, laying him gently on the sand. She stayed beside him through the night, her hand in his, watching him breathe. They'd survived, barely, but they'd survived together. And somehow, that felt like victory. Theron woke at dawn, his body aching and his mind clearer than it had been in years. Maelys sat beside him on the sand, her legs human in the morning light, her hand still clasped in his. She looked exhausted, an impossible thing for a creature sustained by magic, but somehow she'd found a way to be tired. "You stayed," Theron said hoarsely. "Where else would I go?" She squeezed his hand gently. "You nearly died for me last night. The least I could do was make sure you kept breathing." Theron sat up slowly, his muscles protesting. "The ships made it through. All three. I felt them pass beyond the curse's range." Her expression was complex, relief and guilt warring in her ancient eyes. "You were right. The song can be directed. For the first time in 2 centuries, I controlled where it went instead of letting it spread indiscriminately. Then we found something, not a cure, but a method, a way to fight back." At what cost? Maelys gestured to the blood still crusted under his nose, the tremors that occasionally shook his frame. You can't survive that every month, Theron. Eventually, the curse will find a way through your immunity. Eventually, you'll walk into the water and not come back. Maybe, or maybe we get stronger, learn to work together better. He turned to face her fully. I'm not giving up, Maelys. Not on you, not on this. Before she could respond, voices carried from the cliff path. Doctor. Finch appeared, descending carefully, his satchel bouncing against his hip. He stopped when he saw them together, Theron obviously exhausted, Maelys obviously not human despite her current form. Remarkable, Finch breathed. The pale singer herself, and you... He focused on Theron. You survived the full moon in direct proximity. Impossible. Yet here I am. Theron stood, positioning himself slightly in front of Maelys. What do you want, Doctor? To help, if you'll allow it. Finch approached slowly, hands visible and non-threatening. I witnessed something last night from the cliffs. The way the song concentrated instead of spreading. In 20 years of research, I've never seen a siren maintain that kind of control. She's stronger than any curse, Theron said simply. Finch studied them both, his scholarly mind clearly racing. I may have been hasty in my earlier assessment. There are older texts, fragmentary references I dismissed as mythology. They speak of curses being transformed through sustained opposition. Not broken, but evolved. Evolved how? Maelys asked, speaking directly to him for the first time. Instead of fighting the curse's nature, you work with it, channel it. The magic demands death, but perhaps not literal death, perhaps symbolic death, transformation, rebirth. Finch pulled out a weather-stained journal. It's theoretical, dangerous. But if you're already risking everything, he explained his theory. The curse required sacrifice during full moons. That was immutable. But sacrifice took many forms. What if instead of men drowning, something else died? Old pain, ancient grudges, the hatred that fueled the original binding. You're suggesting we feed the curse emotions instead of lives? Theron asked skeptically. I'm suggesting the curse feeds on death because death was what the original caster desired. But magic is literal. It requires what it's told to require. If you can reinterpret the terms, redefine what constitutes sacrifice. Finch shrugged. It might work. It might do nothing. It might kill you both, but it's an option I didn't consider before. Maelys and Theron exchanged glances. After 2 centuries of hopelessness, even a fragile theory felt like salvation. They spent the day preparing. Finch provided what little ritual knowledge he possessed. Maelys shared everything she knew about the curse's inner workings. Theron contributed his immunity and unwavering determination. The plan was simple in concept, brutal in execution. When the next full moon rose, Maelys would sing, but this time, she would pour every ounce of her grief, rage, and sorrow into the melody. Theron would be there, anchoring her, helping her transmute literal death into metaphorical death. They would kill her old pain instead of killing men. It probably won't work, Finch warned as he prepared to leave. But if it does, you'll have created something unprecedented, a curse transformed by love instead of being amplified by it. And if it doesn't work? Maelys asked quietly. Then Theron dies, and you spend eternity knowing you killed the only man who ever tried to save you. Finch's honesty was brutal but necessary. That's the risk. That's always been the risk. After he left, Theron and Maelys sat in the Lighthouse gallery, watching the sun set. The next full moon was 29 days away. 29 days to prepare. 29 days to be together. I'm terrified, Maelys admitted. For 200 years, I knew exactly what I was. A monster. A killer. a cursed thing beyond redemption. But you've made me believe I could be something else. And if we fail, at least we tried. Theron pulled her close. At least you weren't alone. At least someone stood beside you and said you were worth fighting for. You're worth fighting for too, she whispered. I know you don't believe that. I know you've spent 5 years thinking you deserve to die with your crew. But you don't. You deserve to live, Theron. You deserve happiness. So do you. They kissed as the sun disappeared below the horizon. Soft and desperate, hopeful and terrified. 2 broken souls trying to forge something whole from their shattered pieces. The 29 days passed in a rhythm of preparation and connection. They tested boundaries, explored the curse's responses, learned to move as one unit. Maelys taught Theron about the ocean's magic. Theron showed Maelys that humanity could be kind as well as cruel. They fell in love, really, truly, deeply in love. Not the desperate attraction of early meetings, but something richer. Something that saw the worst in each other and chose to stay anyway. When the full moon rose again, they were ready. Theron stood in the shallows, Maelys in his arms. The song began, but this time, she sang of loss and transformation. She sang her grief for the girl she'd been, her rage at Carrick and the entity that cursed her, her desperate hope that 2 centuries of suffering might finally end. Theron held her through it, his presence giving her strength to reshape the magic. He felt the curse struggle, trying to force him into the water, but he pushed back with equal force, feeding at his guilt, his survivor's shame, his 5 years of wishing for death. Die, he told those feelings. Die so we can live. The magic writhed between them, furious and confused. It wanted bodies. It demanded drowning. But they offered something else. The death of old pain, the sacrifice of who they'd been, the transformation into who they might become. For hours they struggled. Blood ran from Theron's ears. Maelys screamed through the song. The ocean itself seemed to rage around them, as if nature itself protested this violation of cosmic rules. Then, just before dawn, something shifted. The curse, bent, not broke. Theron felt its structure remain intact. But it bent, accepting their offering of emotional death instead of literal death. The song changed pitch, became something almost beautiful, almost peaceful. Maelys collapsed in Theron's arms, the melody finally stopping. They stood together in the shallows, both alive, both changed. Did it work? She gasped. I don't know. But we're still here. Theron held her tighter. We're still here, and that's something. They would never know if they truly transformed the curse or simply found a way to temporarily satisfy it. But in the months that followed, the death toll dropped. Some full moons passed with no drownings. Others required their combined effort to redirect the magic. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't a cure. But it was hope. And sometimes, hope was enough. Love asks impossible questions. Love demands we risk everything for someone who might not survive. Love whispers that 2 broken souls can heal each other, even when logic says they'll only cut each other worse. What would you have done? Walked away to protect yourself, or stayed to fight for the impossible? Tell me in the comments below. If this story moved you, please subscribe to Mythical Hearts for more tales of love between humans and mythical creatures. Every week, we bring you romances that transcend all boundaries. Don't forget to hit that like button. It helps us reach more hearts yearning for stories like this. Until our next tale, may you find courage to love despite impossible odds. Thank you for listening.